Today's demo presentation is about microbial-induced corrosion of concrete. We're going to talk about the ability for concrete to be protected by some science. That includes admixtures and coatings. What's important to understand here is that microbial-induced corrosion is not a new phenomenon. It was C.D. Parker back in 1948 who actually discovered that it was bacteria that was causing the corrosion. So the bacteria consumes hydrogen sulfide gas that's present in sewer systems, and it converts that hydrogen sulfide gas into sulfuric acid, and this is done by a sulfur oxidizing bacteria. So it's important to note that it's not the gases that are causing the corrosion, it is the conversion of the gases into acid.
There is a way to look at concrete under a microscope, and when you do that, you can look at the structure, the crystalline structure and the different particles of the concrete inside the concrete. And when you look at that concrete without bacteria, you see it's really nice and clean and fresh. When you look at that same concrete under a microscope where microbial-induced corrosion is present, on the left you can see the picture inside of the concrete structure. This is looking inside of a crack. You can see those rod-shaped bacteria that have formed and are growing in population inside the concrete. On the right you can look, that's the bacteria sitting on the surface. We just went through, or still going through, a pandemic where we're all concerned about bacteria living on surfaces. Well, this is an example of what the bacteria looks like. Those rod-shaped bacteria are the thiobacillus bacteria living on top of the concrete. The process, and we won't go through this in a lot of depth, but the process starts in the sewer under the water line. And you've got some sulfates that are converted to sulfides that are then converted into aqueous hydrogen sulfide gas. One of the important things to note is that this occurs when the oxygen is very low, or what we would say oxygen deficient. So in an anoxic environment where you've got sewer gases that have been retained and are slow moving, then those gases develop inside the liquid. When the liquid is then disturbed or there's turbulence, it becomes dissolution into the airspace, where the H2S then can react and form and be go into the moisture layer on the walls above the crown. And if that's the point where the bacteria can then consume the hydrogen sulfide gas and convert that into sulfuric acid. So that's basically the overview of the corrosion process. There's been a lot of work done over the last 30, 40 years determining what causes this problem and what the stages are. It was 1991, Islander and others discovered that there's a 3-stage process to this event. Then, just in the last decade, a house at Purdue discovered and confirmed that this is a 3-stage process. So stage 1 or phase 1 is carbonation. So what carbonation does is, just through the natural process of the environment, the pH of concrete drops from about 13 to maybe 8, 9 pH. In phase 2, or stage 2 of the corrosion, is what we call the attachment phase. And that's where the bacteria start to live and populate and build a biofilm. And that phase drops the pH down to about 4, where you then begin with stage 3, and stage 3 is the acidification stage. Today, what we're really going to talk about mostly is the attachment phase, or phase 2. And the whole idea is we want to stop the progression of this bacteria from going from one stage to the next. I was at a hotel one time and opened up the closet, and there was a robe, and the robe said one size fits all. And I'm a big guy, and I can tell you one size does not fit all. What I think a lot of people look for when we deal with protection systems for microbial-induced corrosion is they're looking for a one size fits all solution. And I think there's a lot of solutions that need to fit the conditions that exist in these structures. So we're looking at various solutions for various problems, and we're picking the right solution for that problem. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on, but think about that as we progress. The way that the bacteria moves through succession is very important in this discussion. The bacteria, there are several strains, major strains of bacteria, there are more than what I have on the screen, but there are 5 predominant species that have been discovered and were highlighted by Parker's work in 1947. As the bacteria live, they live at different pH ranges, and you can see here at about pH pH 9 on the surface is when the bacteria start to live and thrive. Those bacteria, those first bacteria, are neutrophilic sulfur oxidizing bacteria. They transition the surface pH and lower at the pH and lower the pH. You can see the pH trends on the graph here as the pH is going down, and then it's at about pH 4 where the acidophilic sulfur oxidizing bacteria takes over and colonizes and thrives. And then at about pH 2, that bacteria, Thiobacillus thioxidans, becomes the predominant species in the system. And then at about 1 pH, you start having very severe corrosion of the concrete. So this progression is a progression of time and events. I like to compare this to a relay race. Runners going around the track pass the baton to the next runner, and each runner takes a course and then they pass it to the next runner. Eventually somebody hands that baton off to Usain Bolt, and he takes that baton over the finish line and they win. And I like to compare this to the process of the bacteria transition. But the question is what if the baton never gets passed? What if Usain Bolt never gets that baton and crosses the finish line? That's what the goal is with microbial-induced corrosion protection, is we want to stop that protection or stop that process from, stop the process from going on and protect the concrete. There's a test method, ASTM C1904-20, and in test method A, there was a description in a journal, in the Rylam publication, that states that if the antimicrobial products are not effective, then you would get to the acidophilic bacteria. So the whole case here is for the antimicrobials to be effective, you have to stop the chain of events, just like what we're talking about. And the testing that was done here shows that at different stages of pH, that the antimicrobial solutions do have effectiveness. So this is a very important part of determining how these products work, and it is part of that ASTM standard. It's important also to note that there are different types of antimicrobials. You can have an antimicrobial surface, a surface that just does not render itself to the ability for bacteria to live on that surface. You can have surfaces that have a leachable antimicrobial, that those antimicrobial products live in the surface or exist in the surface, but they give themselves up to kill the bacteria. They're sacrificial. And then you can have a contact killing surface that has a permanent antimicrobial bound to or contained within the surface or the structure that inhibits bacteria to grow, and it kills the bacteria that gets to the surface. That third type is what I'm going to focus on a little bit, and that's a quaternary ammonium compound. And these are cationic surface active agents. They have a silane structure at its base, and that silane structure is important because it creates a covalent bond that makes that molecule permanent to the structure. It bonds chemically, and it's not going to leach out or leave the system. These go back to the 1970s when Dow Corning discovered how to put this together with a silane molecule and a antimicrobial, and it was used in the textile industry to prevent transmission of disease from one hospital room to the next. So the textiles that the doctors wore were treated with this type of an antimicrobial. It was in about 1995 that it started to become popular to be used as a concrete additive, and then it's also used in cements and mortars and tile grouts. It is effective. It kills 99% of those neutrophilic bacteria that live in the systems as tested at a pH 6.5 to 6.8. We have these kinds of products in all of our products around us, from paints to exercise equipment to our office and school supplies. Today, we look for things that say antimicrobial or microbial resistant. And that's important because if somebody touches that, then the bacteria can't live on that surface. Bacteria in a perfect environment can double every 20 minutes. So if you don't have a surface that's treated with an antimicrobial, then the bacteria can live, thrive, and colonize and become a real problem for us in nature. So I've already touched on this a little bit, but I want to talk about two standards, ASTM C1898 and ASTM C1904. First one I want to talk about is a stage 2 test, going back to thinking about the stages. So stage 2 test, ASTM C1904. This is a test where you take a mortar disc and you put it into a solution of bacteria. It's a solution of biogenic acid, if you will. And in a solution where there's no treatment, the pH will drop, the bacterial activity will go off the charts, and you'll have corrosion of that mortar disc. And the picture you see here on the left is a high amount of bacterial activity in that solution. It has no treatments at all. In the middle, you see a treatment with an antimicrobial inside of the matrix of the mortar disc. And on the right, you see a picture of a mortar disc with the antimicrobial in the mortar disc and on the mortar disc. And it's important to note that you see a very cloudy picture to the left, somewhat cloudy in the middle, but on the right, the picture is pretty clear still with no microbial activity in that broth. ASTM C1898 is an acid test. It's just purely a test where you submerge samples of concrete into a bath of acid, and you refresh that acid every so often. And in this particular example, we're showing the test that was at 0.5 pH sulfuric acid. And after 90 days, you can see that a concrete that is untreated is going to lose about 75% of its mass. On the left side of that photo, you can see a concrete that's been treated with a product to prevent that acid from attacking the concrete. And those coatings are effective. And they could be used at stage 3 for stage 3 testing. But it's also important to note that we want to either protect for stage 2 and stop that corrosion process from beginning, or we're protecting at stage 3. And to know that, we need to know the system. So again, I go back to this picture, and I want to clarify and make sure that it's clear to understand that this is the zone where antimicrobials are the most effective. They're most effective at pH above 4 in that neutrophilic bacteria zone. They're stopping that bacteria from progressing. The whole idea there is that if you stop those bacteria from living and thriving, then they won't move on to the next stage. So it'd be like Usain Bolt dropping the baton and tripping and not making it to the finish line. No bacterial succession, no microbial corrosion. There are also, as we talked about, there are also surface applied sealers. And those surface applied sealers can come in many forms. They can be water repellents, where you make it very difficult for the bacteria to live on the surface because they can't attach, or you stop that ability for moisture to be retained on the surface. You can have biocidal or antimicrobial surface treatments. You can have a denser surface. You can have a surface that's so dense the bacteria can't live and get inside the nooks and crannies of the concrete. These are molecular layer type defenses, and they are the first line of defense often for microbial-induced corrosion protection. So you can see here on the right, this is a picture of that same ASTM C1904 test, and it's showing the calcium release in the mortar disc. On the left, you're seeing a major amount of calcium release, and on the right, you're seeing almost no calcium being released in the same test method. I also want to take note that colloidal silicas, while there's not a lot of science on this yet, colloidal silicas have been known to reduce corrosion in sulfuric acid. These are products that are pure silicon dioxide, and they are at the range of 1 to 100 nanometers in size. That's about 1,000 times smaller than the human hair. Very small products, very high surface area, so they're very reactive. ACI Committee 241 Nanotechnology is studying these more and more, and there's papers coming out to discuss what these are. They add strength and durability, and they improve concrete's resistance in acid. They also reduce the penetration of water into the concrete. This particular example is concrete of high quality that would normally have good resistance to moisture, and the colloidal silica can actually reduce that even greater. In this case, 32% more reduction of water penetration at 200 psi pressure. And then, as we talked about, that ability for the bacteria to attach to the walls is reduced when there's ability for the repellency of moisture on the water layer, so that the colloidal silicas can help with water repellency and the reduction of the tension of water on the surface. So I've got one video here I'm going to show. Hopefully this plays, and I'll show this video and I'll come back in just a second.
Biogenic sulfuric acid is the enemy of concrete wastewater systems. Bacterial oxidation of hydrogen sulfide leads to microbially induced corrosion of concrete. Finding the right products to resist MICC can be expensive and time-consuming. Concrete Sealants offers a line of products that increase the service life of concrete structures in corrosive environments. For treating wastewater systems, it starts with ConBlock MIC, a concrete admixture that makes the surface resistant to microbes. When paired with ConBlock Topical Sealer, you have a strong and cost-effective combination to combat low corrosion severity environments. Add ConBlock CDA, along with ConBlock MIC and ConBlock Topical, for higher acid and water-resistant properties to counteract the effects of median corrosion severity environments. For the most severe environments, CS 1800, a solvent-free elastomeric waterproof coating, offers strong water and acid resistance under hydrostatic pressures up to 100 psi. Conceal's complete system of products give concrete wastewater systems the best chance to reach a 100-year lifespan, all at 1/3 the cost of other protection products. Contact Conceal today to learn more.
All right, so what we're getting to here with our protection systems, and we're just one of several available protection systems, we're talking about taking this corrosion process, which corrosion can be measured in mass loss over time. And if you've got a system that is not treated or not protected, that mass loss over time could be a lot of mass loss over a very short amount of time. Our whole goal with adding these treatments is allowing the purchaser and allowing the designer to decide how much protection they need for how much time based upon the corrosive effects of the system. So ultimately what we want to do here is to add more years of service to the system. And so picking the right solution to do that is what we're looking for. So we need to consider the severity levels. Severity level 1 might be low bacterial population, low bacterial activity. We might consider this high flows and low detention times. So you don't have a lot of stagnant water, but you still have some risk. So this would be severity level 1 type of conditions. Then you've got severity level 2, or I'm sorry, severity level 3, which is high bacterial population and high bacterial activity. So this is the worst severity level. And in this particular severity level, you would see slow to stagnant flows, you would see long detention times, you'd see a lot of turbulence, and then high biological oxygen demand. Typically a pipe that's very long and very slow flow. This is what you're going to see stage 3, severity level 3. And then we've got severity level 2, which is some combination of the above. These have slow flows, but they have longer detention times as well. But they don't have the severe rates of corrosion possible that you would have with stage or severity level 3 environments. The other thing to think about, and this happens a lot, is you may have severe corrosion in one specific area of a system, of a sewer system. You may have it in one specific line or one specific trunk or one specific manhole or a lift station or a drop manhole. And corrosion tends to be low in that tank. So sometimes you can specifically choose the corrosion protection based upon the location of that severity. In a septic tank, for instance, most of the corrosion of a septic tank happens at an outlet pipe, and the rest of the tank is fairly unscathed, but the outlet area is completely eaten away. So what we need to get to, what we need to think about, is we need to fit the solution of the microbially induced corrosion. We need to fit it to the condition that we see in the field. We need to make sure that we're picking the solution that fits the condition so that we can make best use of the resources, which resources are money in this case. Concrete Sealants has come up with a chart based upon our solution products, and we use a severity level 1, 2, and 3, and we select which system to use based upon that type of condition. As you can see here, at severity level 1, we consider 10 to 30 parts per million of hydrogen sulfide gas, and at this time we're going to use ConBlock MIC. If we go to severity level 2, we're going to choose ConBlock MIC and ConBlock Topical, which is a antimicrobial water repellent sealer that is placed on the surface, applied to the surface. And then for the severity level 3, we're going to suggest ConBlock MIC, ConBlock CDA, and ConBlock Topical. But there are times where you may have even higher corrosion potential than that. And in that case, we would suggest that you would apply 2 30 ml coats of CS 1800, our coating for acid protection. And just to show you again that photo, this is CS 1800 on the left after 90 days in 0.5 pH sulfuric acid. So this particular protective system is going to provide you with the most acid resistant protection if you consider that your system is going to go into stage 3 corrosion. Each one of these systems, those systems that I've already talked about and other systems, all come with a cost, and it's important to take into consideration the cost of those systems because, again, the cities and municipalities have limited resources, and to make use of the best resources, we want to pick the solution that fits the conditions seen. With that, that brings me to the conclusion of my presentation, my demo here.